I wrote a chapter in my book called "The Myth of Male Vulnerability," the myth of male vulnerability, and the whole premise was that in modern within modernity, within the modern narrative and sort of like cultural conversation, vulnerability is having its spotlight. It's the queen right now. It's really this sort of like cure-all solution and band-aid and salve that largely women are telling men they need to deploy. This isn't to say that there isn't benefit in men being vulnerable sometimes, but the myth of male vulnerability is just as follows. The myth is that if you as a man are just vulnerable, more vulnerable, it'll solve all your problems. This is what's being told to men culturally. If you're vulnerable in your relationship, in your life, with the men in your life, with your family, it'll just make things better. And this is the sort of ideology that, in my opinion, has infiltrated the the therapeutic industrial complex. This really big, powerful therapeutic conversation that has entered into modern culture and society that approaches solutions, psychological problems, psychological issues, and challenges from a very female centric perspective, which says, talk about your problems, be super open about them, be very vulnerable about them, have them validated, and that will help you feel better. And for a lot of women, that does help them feel better. For a lot of men, when they go into therapy, that helps them maybe feel better for a little bit, but when their external life doesn't change, when the
Yes.
realities don't change, when they don't lose the weight or the relationship's still a shit show and they're not having very much sex and they're miserable with their bank account, they're like, okay, I mean, I've talked about it a whole bunch, but now what do I do? And so men need a more tactical, solutions oriented process. We need to actually do something. And
Yes.
generally speaking, men are going to therapy, yes, in part to open up about what's going on. That is absolutely necessary. Like Carl Jung, I'll wrap up with this one piece here. Carl Jung, he said the first step in any therapeutic or spiritual process is the act of confession. It's the act of opening up about what's actually been going on. And for a lot of men, that's helpful because for a lot of guys, they haven't talked about their childhood abuse or being abandoned or neglected or the sexual abuse that they experienced, et cetera, et cetera. Those things haven't been talked about and they're just repressing them and it's having a negative impact on their life. So there is value to that. But why a lot of men come into therapy or coaching is because they're looking for direction. They need to develop a skill. And that skill could be more direct communication. It could be, getting a morning ritual and routine in place, but they're trying to develop something specific that they are going to that's going to acknowledge that they're creating change and shifts in their life. So I'll pause there. There's more I can say, but I'll pause there.
Enough there for the hour. That's fantastic. I mean, let me just paraphrase a few things, and then we can kind of underline in red and go back. So I'd summarize it this way. The problem is that not men are, the men aren't talking about their problems. The problem is the men have problems. All right. So the fundamental thing is not they're not talking about those problems, is they have fucking problems in the
Yeah.
world today. If men are killing themselves in record numbers, we're fantastic at killing ourselves, 4 times better than women at killing ourselves. And why is that when 85% of them are in therapy who kill themselves, for the statistic I saw from the UK?
Yeah.
So clearly the therapy isn't the solution. And psychologists are women. Some of them are women with dicks. Some of them are actual women. The psychologist is a feminine pursuit. I did psychology at university. 90% of people in that field were female then, even more so now. It's a far left feminine field, which is a sort of political ideology which embraces the feminine as the answer. And this is American cultural influence of sort of confessional, talking about your things is the answer. Whereas it might be
Mm.
part of a solution. It might be, if I was to list 10 things that are good for men, it might be a number 10 or number 11 or 12 on the list, but it certainly wouldn't be the top five. So, yeah, dig down into any of that a bit more. I'm lapping it up.
Yeah, I don't want to give the picture that all therapy is bad. I think that the therapy, like if you're a man and you go into therapy and you spend, 6, 12 months just talking about your issues and the therapist hasn't given you anything tactical to do, that probably is bad therapy. Um, we as men need to cultivate skills. We need to be able to feel useful. Like on that note, there's a great there's a great researcher named Richard Reeves here in the States. I think he's originally from the UK. Could be wrong about that. But he started the American Institute for Men and Boys. They've done a ton of research around male suicide as an example. Some of that research that you're citing with, 80% of men that committed suicide in the UK were in therapy. Sorry, 90%. I think it was 90%
Was
of
it
men,
90?
90%. And the interesting fact is that 80% of them were listed as low risk or no risk for suicide. So the therapist couldn't even identify that they were at risk for suicide. Now, why is that? It's because men are going to take their lives for different reasons than women, and the cues are going to be different. So Richard Reeves, they studied suicide notes from men, and they found that there was a couple really common words. One of them was the word useless. So a lot of men that go into therapy are looking for help in developing a type of usefulness, right? They want to feel useful for their girlfriend, their wife, their kids, their friends, their culture, their society. And in some ways, in our modern culture, we have told men, you shouldn't want that. We don't need you, right? And this is a very common trope that a lot of women are telling their men, right? It's like, I don't need you. I don't need a man. And
And
for
that's
a
what we
man,
most want, right? Like I said to my girlfriend yesterday, you don't like being objectified. I love it because I'm a tool that wants to be used. And
right.
I'm like, how can I help? That's my
Yes.
question as a man. And if the answer is you can't, you're useless, then why do I exist? I'm a
Yeah.
useless tool.